welcome to the virtual SMB Summit. We have an amazing guest today. Andy Hafer has spent his entire career in technology. The first part of his career was in corporate IT, but he's been a serial entrepreneur for the last 14 years. Andy founded, and he actually currently serves on the board of directors of Dynamic Communities, of which I'm associated with, a member. It's a management corporation that adds value to a big community of members through peer-to-peer learning and knowledge sharing. It's grown to over 200,000 members with activities on 6 continents. Andy's also co-founder of his most recent enterprise, Synapse Florida, which is a nonprofit organization that guides Florida's innovation communities to help accelerate success and drive economic growth. In addition, Andy found, boy, you do a lot of things, which is awesome. There's a progression here that I actually, Andy and I were talking beforehand. I actually wanted to unpack a little bit because it's really cool. Andy founded DCE Productions, a full-service event and audio-video services company. DCE brings high-quality AV videography and other digital features to corporate, social, and philanthropic events. He also previously served as CEO and president of Tampa Bay Technology Forum. I participated in the Battle of the Bands there a few years ago when I was at Tribridge. It's a professional association of technology and business leaders dedicated to growing and promoting Tampa Bay's ecosystem, which is really growing. There's a recurring theme, community and service, with Andy's track record here. And he is all about service. He and his wife founded something called Metropolitan Ministries and Social Enterprise. Board for Social Enterprise and I Matter. So it's super excited to talk to Andy. He's before that he worked at Pride Enterprises, a little company called Tribridge that I'm familiar with, Yara, Accenture, Procter & Gamble, and IBM. He was born in Allentown, Pennsylvania, but was raised as a Floridian since the age of 5. He likes to ride in boats, fish, and all kinds of outdoor stuff. He lives in Tampa with his wife, Eileen, and children Thomas, Matthew, and Alexis. Andy, welcome to the SMB Summit.
You got it. Thank you. That was extensive. I should have edited that down before I handed it to you. I didn't know it was going to be so but the one thing I got to correct is I did not found Metropolitan Ministries. People would be very impressed if they thought I was the founder.
Okay.
That's a huge ministry here in Tampa Bay that serves the homeless population, and
Awesome.
I served there. But no, someone a lot smarter than me a long time ago got that one
So
going.
was I Matter?
I Matter is the there's 2 nonprofits that I am very proud of and spend a lot of time with, and we can talk about that. It's I Matter, and then there's this thing called Village of Hope, which actually is the mission-based activity that we talked about. We'll know each other, so yeah, we can talk about that stuff.
That's cool. Well, it's kind of along the topic, and so it's interesting. I purposely. And maybe I went a little too long on it, but on the intro, you had this really cool progression with your career, where it seems like there's been a evolution from these sort of kind of important corporate roles to still very important entrepreneurial roles, but more focused on service and community, whether it's Tampa Tech Forum, I Matter, or what you're doing right now with the dynamic communities, or the work you do with universities. So would love to, was there a single thing that happened that moved you in that direction, entrepreneurial servant leadership type thing, or was it just a gradual, man, this feels good?
Yeah, I'd like to tell you that it was on purpose. I think I might have lost you there. Are we frozen up? Can you hear me still? think I might have you back, Chuck.
You're back.
Okay.
Well, that's okay. We can probably splice that Netflix thing out. All the kids on the street are watching Netflix.
That's the problem. It's cinching us down. Yeah, I'd like to say that there was a method to the madness on all that, but it was, for the most part, it was quite, I don't know, accidental, probably. I don't want to sound like I really had a method to the madness. It was, I graduated with an engineering degree and went to be an engineer and realized I didn't like in pure engineering as much. I liked working with people more. And so I went back for an MBA and did what most recent graduates out of MBA school do. Was a consultant, and I kind of went up that for a while and eventually became a corporate IT person, and spent a career in that. Really, the first 20 or so years of my career, I was in enterprise IT, and somewhere along the line, used to really enjoy getting benefits out of user groups. We were implementing SAP back in the 90s, and they had a really great user group, and I used to get a lot of value out of community, and I'm a social guy to begin with. And so then when I moved companies somewhere in the early 2000s to a smaller company, let me stay at home a little bit more with my relatively new kids. And so I went to a smaller company, and we chose a Microsoft product called Exapta. It's brand new to the North American market. But when I went to go find some of that same community value that I found with the SAP users group in the whole decade before, it just didn't exist. So went and started one. In fact, I did a meeting on a stage with 3 other CIOs at a Microsoft event called Convergence. Many people may remember that back in the day. And that was really the first time I had talked to other people that were in my shoes that were implementing that same software product. And so it just was clear that there was value in community, and that's what caused me to start the user group. And one thing led to another, and that the volunteer nights and weekends to keep that mailing list and that call list together and have the occasional conference call turned into more than a full-time job. And so I eventually quit my day job in enterprise IT and tried to make a run of being this full-time user group guy. And that's where that kind of started. And I realized that I have a saying, one of the most powerful things in the universe is when people come together in community and try to solve each other's problems. That's sort of where that came from. And, the evolution of that from dynamic communities and sort of the Microsoft specific user groups all the way to using those same principles to establish other communities. And you mentioned Synapse, and that's a nonprofit here in Florida that really uses the same principles to find out where disparate constituents bring value to each other, and really build programs and services around that so that people can come together and bring value to each other. So that's kind of the secret sauce, which is not that secret, but it really feels good to me. I love helping other people, and one of the most gratifying things in the world to me is when someone says, "Man, I didn't know how to do this, and I came to one of your meetings, or I was on a conference call, or attended a webinar, and next thing you know, I got my answers, and I can't wait to give back to the community as well."
That's awesome. So along those lines, let's talk about dynamic communities. We're interviewing Robbie Kellman Baxter, and she wrote this book called The Membership Economy. And in that book, she talks about creating communities that build super users. And I think that that's really, really relevant these days. And even if somebody's not using Dynamics and they're not in your community, the whole concept of having a subscription and trying to get towards build a community around your solution is relevant for almost anybody in any business. That's kind of what the secret sauce is at Dynamic Communities, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Very pragmatically in dynamic communities where you are talking about super users that get built. There's people who use those communities for fundamental training when they bring new hires into a company on either a piece of software or whatever else they're trying to bring them up on. All the way to other less tangible kinds of things. Like I'll go back to the Synapse example, which is really an economic development nonprofit, and having empathy for people who are also trying to achieve something in the ecosystem. It's just super. There's a lot of value in that, and so when you raise yourself to be a knowledgeable person, and you're willing to give back to the community, that's what makes the network more valuable. I'm using the word value quite a bit, I've noticed, but to me that is the key. That is the key, is you really got to figure out where the value comes from each of the different members of the community, the nodes on the network, if you will, and really just make sure that stays the top priority.
Cool. There's a word that's I learned a few years ago, and it's called servant leadership, and I didn't really know what it was, but I did notice that to your point, my wife and I would do some things, mission related or service related. Wow. And then I started doing some of those things at work, and I went, oh, wow, work is gratifying too. So it kind of feels like that servant leadership is more important now with what's going on in the world than ever. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah. I mean, the one thing that these types of crises that happen in our lives, I mean, starting with, well, not starting, but certainly the most recent one, 9/11, and a few of the other things along the way. And then, of course, this big COVID one that we're in the middle of right now, that it really allows people to show their true colors. And you see people obviously in fear for whatever they're afraid of, but you see members of a neighborhood coming out for each other. You find the nice parts of people that maybe didn't take the time to notice those things before and help their neighbor out. So I think servant leadership is basically the manifestation of that on a full-time basis. And if you can demonstrate to your employees or to your whatever ecosystem you're involved in that you're there first for them, I think it just creates a much better culture for everybody to spend what is essentially a significant part of our lives in. So that to me is the premise for servant leadership, and that's the fact that you're going to go first. You're going to lift the heavy box first. There's nothing that you're too good for, and I think that's what we try to, that's the premise we try to attain.
That makes great sense. So what kind of benefits do companies see when they lean into organizations like dynamic communities that you've seen? I know you've touched on some.
Yeah, well, I've spent a lot of time studying this, and there's dynamic communities is built for peers by peers, and what I mean by that is people who are contributing. So there's not a lot of hierarchy. We do have advisory boards and governance, things like that, but for the most part, it is a grassroots effort. We try to keep it that way. I mean, we try to keep, we try not to polish it up too much because we want the true person involved. And so I think the whole point is the when people come to the community, they're coming for probably three reasons. They're volunteering their time to get involved because no one's really paying for it, but there is a quid pro quo aspect. So which is the first piece of the reason people come to the community. They want something, they'll give something, but they want something back. Quid pro quo is what I call that. There is another aspect, and that's the ego. Some people just like to do it because it's a pedestal for them to stand on. It's a stage, it's an opportunity to stroke the ego. And I don't mean to make that sound bad, because the people who are giving in order to satisfy, that's not a bad thing.
Recognition.
Yeah, the recognition, the gamification. I call it this is dating me, but the Donkey Kong effect. You used to go to the arcade and put your quarter in, and you did it enough times until your name kind of went to the top of that leaderboard. That's serving our ego, but it also gives you the gratification. So there's a lot of stuff built into that. But then really the last thing is altruism. Some people just do it because it's the right thing to do. And that's why you have Little League coaches and Girl Scout leaders and that aspect. So, people come to the community for different things, but at the end of the day, I think they come because they feel part of something that's bigger than themselves. And I always encourage people to be a little bit selfish and make sure that they're not only giving, but they're also taking and bringing things back that are valuable to them. So that's kind of how people get involved and why they get involved and how they sustain staying involved.
Yeah, I had written down a question to ask you, but I think you maybe just gave us the magic formula to do this. But I'm going to share the question, and if you want to add something to it, you can. So the technology business has gotten more advanced by the day, but at the same time, it's like even with like what I do, CRM, it's like it's growing. But about half the time, people aren't happy with it. And so how can companies who are and the purpose of CRM is to get closer to your customers. So if companies are looking to get closer to their customers and build communities up around their users or clients or whatever, is there anything you can add to that sort of magic formula to help them build those communities to get more value out of it?
Well, I talk to people every day. In fact, I talked to my banker today because I'm in the middle of this PPP campaign to try to figure out how to have the company share in some of the economic stimulus. And these poor bankers today, they got slammed with this SBA lending thing last week, and no one really knows exactly what it's going to do, but they've had to figure out how to fend off the public and really try to help the public and their clients. And so we just had this conversation today. You would never think that you should have I'm going to call it a user group for bankers, but clients of a bank, we're all in this together. We don't exactly know how to fill out these forms. If people are in the middle of this, they know exactly what I'm talking about. You have to calculate your payroll costs from last year, and the government will help you keep people employed. It's a great cause, and it's a great program, but we're all confused. And so the burden comes right to the banker. We are all waiting in line for that poor guy or woman to call us back, and it doesn't have to be that way. There's somebody that knows a little bit more than me in this community, and there's somebody that knows a little bit more than that person. And so if we were just to kind of share information, we could lift an entire burden of support off of my bank, and that's just one. And so what I always keep saying is that the more you share, the more the burden gets shared among people. So companies, I recommend it all the time. If in some cases, you create a set of raving fans, a fan club for your company. If you allow community to happen for people who have things in common that can gather, that's sort of the magic of it. And I used to think it made a lot of sense around software, but I've been doing a lot of places that are beyond software user groups, and the same principles work.
That makes great sense. Andy, you're awesome. You're an awesome servant leader. We so appreciate you being on this. So the good news is whether they have dynamics or not, you're still a great guy to follow. But if somebody, how does somebody kind of get plugged in with you and or dynamic communities? Because I know literally everybody I know who's been involved with dynamic communities has gotten more back from it than they've put back into it. So how can they get plugged in with you?
Well, the easiest thing is to visit dynamiccommunities.com, and although we're doing a website forklift right now, so no telling what that looks like when you go out there. But
I saw it look pretty good.
good, yeah, it's improving, and that team's doing a great job. But there's, it's called Dynamic Communities. It actually was named before Microsoft changed the name of their software to Dynamics. That it was a crazy coincidence in the beginning, but at the end of in the beginning of it all, I was trying to create dynamic communities. Had nothing to do with software. So I don't want anyone to think that you have to use dynamics to get value out of dynamic communities. There's communities around all kinds of different things. Business analytics. We're just introducing this big area around cybersecurity. That used to be something reserved for the people down the hall that worried about hackers and stuff. Now that getting into the boardroom, and everyone's got to be worried about it. So there's
our platform.
Yeah, our platform is a kind of a citizen developer tool. So yes, in the world of technology, there's the deep techie stuff, but then there's the people who run businesses that rely on technology, and there's something for everybody. So dynamiccommunities.com. That's a great place to start.
Awesome. Andy, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.